IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to All Things Policy. We've got China's nuclear weapons on our minds right now, and that's because a couple of weeks back, researchers at the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies in California made public these satellite images that they say show clear evidence that China is building 119 silos for ICBMs. Most likely, these are to fit the DF-41 ICBM, which can hit targets up to 15,000 kilometers away. Couple of things to note about these DF-41s. One is that their fuel is solid state, which means you don't have to wait around as the rocket is fueled. And two, they're MIRVed, meaning they have multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. DF-41s probably have 10 of them. Now, to discuss what this means, if it means anything, why China might be building these silos, what India should do about all this, I'm joined, of course, by Suyash Desai and also by Pranav Satyanath. Pranav used to work with us at Takshashila. He's now completed a master's in Singapore, and he's someone who's really passionate about nuclear weapons policy, arms control, and it's great to have him back on All Things Policy.
Thank you, Aditya. Hi, thanks, Aditya.
All right. I want to start with you, Suyash. Just run us through what exactly it is that has been found in the desert in China. What are these silos? Where are they? And how do they fit into the broader picture of China's nuclear forces?
Thanks, Aditya. So basically what happened is a few days back, roughly 2-3 weeks back, researchers and satellite imagery observers found around 119 silos in the desert in China. So these silos were 3 kilometers away from each other. There are two or three ways of interpreting this development. Before I go to the interpretation part, this is not the first time in 2021 that these silos are found. Previously, in earlier 2021, I think in the first quarter itself, in around February, 16 or 17 such silos were found in Inner Mongolia. To be specific, Inner Mongolia is PLA and PLA-RF's training ground. So at that point of time, the interpretation was basically they are creating more silos for developing new training system, new training tactics. And this is also a time when new type of training, which is cohesive to the new type of developments that are happening in the PLA was we were discovering the new type of training, probably the new type of training. Now what has happened is there are three interpretations of discovery of silos. First one, and this is prominently by the Chinese scholars who study arms control and China's nuclear missiles, they argue that this probably could be China's move towards launch on warning posture. This has a lot of disagreement. All the scholars, Western scholars, most of them disagree that this is an indicator of launch on warning, China moving towards launch on warning. Some of them say that or agree with the proposition that China is moving towards launch on warning, but this is not an indicator to decide that. Second interpretation is that China is increasing the number of warheads, and because the warheads have increased, the missiles are also increasing. How do I and why do I say that? In the 2020 DoD China military power report was one of the earliest to say that they are doubling the size of nuclear warheads. China has 100 DF-41 missiles that we know of, at least it's roughly around that figure, that ballpark figure. China claims that one DF-41 missile can hold up to 10 warheads. But in reality, they have only tested 2 warheads, and the best informed guess is that they can hold from 2 to 6 warheads in per missile. if you do the calculation, this figure matches up with what China report was saying, because the warheads, military power report was saying, because the warheads are increasing, the missiles are also increasing. This is one interpretation of understanding the increase in the number of silos. But most of the authors or most of the scholars don't deny that the number of warheads are increasing, but this cannot be a conclusive, this cannot be a causation for silos. Third, and the most informed guess is that China is venturing into shell game. So what is shell game? Shell game is basically what US was thinking to employ in the Cold War. China was also thinking to go towards shell game in 1980s. So basically you construct many shells which can hold many silos, which can hold missiles. If for hypothetical calculation, if there are 100 silos, this can hold 100 missiles or can hold 10 missiles or can hold a single missile or no missile. But it confuses the aggressor regarding China's capabilities. In case of an escalation, the aggressor would think that China is having 100 missiles and they would have to use multiple warheads to destroy all these silos. Thus, the cost of aggression is more, and China complicates it by using the various deceptive tactics. So, when you put all of this picture together, you can find that China is the best informed guess that this is a shell game to create more deception and deterrence. This perhaps is the most informed view about what is happening in China right now.
Thanks, Suyash. Pranav, turning to you, as someone who tracks these issues of vertical proliferation, who looks at arms control, this cannot be entirely surprising, right? We've been looking at both American noise and capability about counterforce, meaning the deployment of the ground-based mid-course interceptors, the SM-3 Block 2A Aegis missiles. All of this, potentially provides some cause of concern for the Chinese. Is that what you think is driving China's moves, or is it something entirely different?
Thank you very much, Aditya, and it's great to be back on the podcast. Let me first say that I do agree with what Suyash said. Suyash really did summarize what the current debate is about these newly discovered silo constructions. But let me first add a bit of nuance to what Suyash said. Indeed, there is a debate about what the silos are used for, and there are two interpretations. The first interpretation is that China will definitely put in one-to-one missiles for each of the silos. So if there are 119 silos discovered, there's a debate saying, there's one school that says that China will definitely put 119 missiles into each of these silos. The second is about shell games. There are two kinds of shell games that can be played. The first one is that you can either have dummy silos, or you can have silos with fixed missile launchers, right? So this would mean that the missiles cannot be moved around into different shells. This means that the US would probably be able to discover the location of a single missile. The third interpretation is similar to the concept of the missile protection system, which was using mobile launchers and move missiles within the shelters into different silos. This would create an impression that you would have similar number of missiles, but you would move them around, and you would have a very limited number of missiles that would move around between empty shelters, so that you would have a better capability of deception. Speaking of deception, I do agree that there is a very unique dynamic of an arms race that's going on. It's very gradual, but it has been very observable for the past 5 to 6 years. The US has obviously is undertaking a new cycle of modernization where they're bringing in new sets of missile capabilities, including upgrades to the SM-3, as well as talking about the next generation of ICBMs, currently known as ground-based strategic interceptor. The thing is that on the US side, they are definitely looking at more counterforce capabilities, more accurate missiles, lower yield warheads, and capability to disarm the other side. While on the Chinese side, the arms control the arms race dynamic is quite different. They are looking something more about the concern of survivability. The Chinese side is looking at how do you deceive the adversary? How do we have more mobile missiles? How do we ensure that the US cannot track missiles, even if they have SAR, even if they have advanced satellite capabilities and reconnaissance capabilities. So on one side you have counterforce, and on the other side you have deception, which gives rise to a unique race where they are not fighting over similar technologies or doctrines; they are fighting over different doctrines, and you have a different kind of security dilemma that's being played during peacetime, which contributes to a very large sense of misperception of intentions and could spiral out of control. And this arms race is quite different from what we saw in the Cold War.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct in that you're looking at two countries that think about nuclear weapons in very different ways, have very different incentives, as well as perhaps willingness or ability to deploy certain technologies. But having said all that, yes, obviously there's a cat and mouse game. There's a back and forth between the US and China on this. But why do you think it might spiral out of control?
Essentially, because if both sides don't understand what the other side's real intention is, then for the US, for example, they might think that China certainly has expansionist intentions, and they would assume that China is building its capabilities independent of US actions, right? And they might perceive this, and they might continue to build their missile arsenal and technologies. Whereas the Chinese, on the similar hand, would think that their actions, which is to deceive the Americans or the West, think that it's independent of the American action is independent of what the Chinese are doing, which is that Americans want to disarm China irrespective of what the geopolitical condition is. And each side might think that each other's action is independent of one another, despite not realizing that there is a strategic interdependence, right? Especially between nuclear powers, there is always a sense of strategic interdependence. There is a tacit cooperation in the sense that even if two sides don't desire to cooperate, there is a sense of cooperative behavior because one side's actions directly influences the others, and in not understanding what the other's intention is could lead to actions without interpreting what the consequences are, which is really the reason why it could spiral out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand, but there are varying degrees of spiraling out of control, right? This is what, just more deception and more counterforce capabilities. That's about it, right?
Yes, we would definitely not see China building up its arsenal to an extent in the thousands, because they neither have the resources nor the ability to produce such a large amount of fissile material necessary for an arsenal. Furthermore, it would put a sense of burden to their existing command and control structure and missile support infrastructure. So there are structural limits to the extent to which this cat and mouse game, as you say, would go. But definitely, the spiral out of control could also be in the sense of how each other perceive their intentions and how these perceptions would creep into a time when, if there's a crisis.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think the point that we're concerned about spiraling out of control is when there is a crisis or conflict. And just to feed off of that, Suyash, I just want to get back to you to put this in context. Can you just tell us about the evolution of China's thinking about nuclear weapons, because you've actually written a paper on this. How have you seen an evolution in this in the last few years?
So going back to the earlier time, I think China has always believed in no first use. It still believes in no first use, but there are some contradictory documents. There are very limited contradictory documents which says otherwise. But largely, China believes in no first use, no use of nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear weapon state or a no nuclear weapon zone. These are the primary elements or fundamentals on which China's nuclear doctrine is based upon. There has been no change in the doctrine apart from 2 or 3 papers which have contradictory views, which are also coming out of Chinese establishments. But over a period of time, they have been challenged within the Chinese strategic community. That's part one of regarding doctrine. But there are some developments which could contradict these beliefs. For example, the type of capabilities that they are developing over a period of time. We have briefly discussed while discussing what's happening. We have also discussed capabilities. We are also discussing posture, the change in the capabilities, like especially the capabilities like DF-21 missiles, DF-26 missiles. In case of DF-21 missiles, there are A, B, C, and D. one of the A, B, C, and D missile is can host a nuclear warhead. But the F-26 missile, a missile itself is capable of hosting nuclear as well as conventional warhead. So the basic argument is that, again, it is largely dealing with deception, but the basic argument here is that such developments create ambiguity, and within the fog of war, this can lead to an escalation. There are also concerns, which I briefly mentioned in the opening remark, regarding China's move towards launch on warning posture. If that happens, and if you consider deception and ambiguity together, launch on warning can in fact be the first stage, first shot unknowingly. So these are certain changes that are happening which questions what has happened in the past. But at doctrinal level, I would still agree that there has been no change apart from few mentions here and there.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Yash. Pranav, just coming back to you, in the event of the sort of crisis that you alluded to, how would these different perceptions of the US and China play out?
In the sense that, let me first also say that regarding the question of silos and launch on warning, we know by far that China has now by and large shifted from a liquid fuel ICBMs to solid fuel ICBMs, and all of which are mobile missiles, right? So in case they want to put them in silos, in case they want to fill each and every silo with a single one-to-one missile, then what you would have is a case of what the US has been doing, which is to ensure that the ICBM acts as a sponge so that their other aspects of their triad, which is their submarines and their air capabilities, play the role of nuclear retaliation. But this is not possible in China because China's land leg of the triad is by far the most significant compared to the air and sea capabilities, because they have a very large number of mobile missiles. So in this sense, putting one-to-one missiles in each and every silo does not make sense, particularly when you have 3 to 6 warheads in each ICBM. It doesn't make sense because you are essentially wasting most of your capabilities. So there is a very, very good chance that the silos could play a role in as multiple aim points as a shell game system. So there is definitely skepticism in this sense. For the Americans, in terms of crisis, coming to your question, there would be 3 kinds of misperceptions that would happen, as outlined in a very nice paper which was published earlier this year by a scholar named David Logan. The essential misperception would be that China co-locates their conventional and nuclear capabilities, and the US was perceived that these capabilities are being done on these forces are being commingled on purpose to create ambiguity, and the US would think that China is ready for escalation. The US would think that China is more capable of accepting risks, even though this might not be the case. As the paper shows, it might be because of resource constraints that China is commingling missiles. At the same time, mobile missiles, contrary to popular belief, mobile missiles are actually far easier to detect than many perceive, because a mobile missile is not just a single missile. It's also a convoy of support and infrastructure and long convoys of trucks and radars that have to help in the launch process. So these could be easily detected via satellites, right? So China, which is the reason why China is also putting these missiles underground. The US would perceive that this is launch on warning, and they would once again perceive that China is more open to undertaking risks, even though this might not be the case, because China would definitely be concerned about its mobile missiles, so they're putting it underground. So such concerns that the Americans would perceive that the China is doing something deliberately, even though it's not, would fuel concerns that China is ready to escalate crises and go take steps to take a conventional conflict into a nuclear conflict.
Thanks. Yeah, what's really interesting about this is that, like you pointed out, Pranav, all of these types of nuclear launches are really meant to enhance survivability in some way or the other, right? You enhance survivability in a handful of ways. You can keep mobility, you can do hardening, you can do deception, and you can do concealment. And all of these try to use these, either one or two or more of these attributes in order to enhance survivability. And that can be interpreted as something else by a potential adversary. Now, we'll get back to the ICBM silos and what they mean, especially for India. But just staying on the topic that you both have brought up about escalation and about dual use capabilities, the discrimination problem. Starting with you, Suresh, you have in the past often said that perhaps the real cause of concern still remains the DF-26 and the theater nuclear weapons, because you have a discrimination problem there, because these can be both, these are hot swappable. You can have conventional and nuclear munitions. And so when one of these is launched during a conflict, you don't know what is going to happen, right? Can you just elaborate on that and why you think that is far more significant than, say, a few more silos?
Correct. I agree completely with what you're saying, Aditya, because these are, so for example, I'll talk about what's happening on the border recently. If you study the course of events that have happened on the border, one or two significant developments are detection of DF-26, which was detected near Bhutan. Bhutan is very close to our air base, Daulat Beg Oldi air base. So that's a major concern. Now, as I've already mentioned, and also as you have already mentioned while asking this question, the basic problem with this missile is the identifiability or detectability, especially in the escalatory posture. In the fog of war, it's very difficult to detect, and this can lead to an unintended escalation on both the sides. It might turn out, because one stabilizing factor is that both the countries, India as well as China, have no first use doctrines, which is a very stabilizing factor between the India-China nuclear dyad. But fog on war and China's deception technique can be interpreted in multiple ways, and this can lead to an unintended escalation between the two countries. That's the real issue when we talk about DF-26 and DF-21D. So that is why these are major concerns going forward, more than the silos, because silo is not a concern for India per se. Okay, it will be a wrong statement to say silo is not a concern for India. Silo is a bigger concern for the United States than that of India, because generally these silos are believed to have DF-41 missiles, and these are inter-theater missiles more than intra-theater missiles. So because DF-21 and DF-26 are intra-theater missiles, and which can also hold these capabilities, and to add to it, there are China's deception technique. It makes the India-China nuclear dyad more complicated than it was in the past. And we have seen it manifesting, though these are conventional weapons, we have seen some elements of these dyad manifesting on the border during the ongoing China-India border dispute.
Pranav?
For the crises, this would be the DF-26 is of concern both for the US and India. Not just because they're truly dual capable, in the sense that you can actually switch between conventional and nuclear warheads during peacetime or during a crisis. And both of them are operated by the same brigade. Even though they're kept in different shelters, they are operated by the same brigade. This would be more concern for less for India. I would again disagree with a little bit Suyash, because looking at the order of battle in which China places its DF-26s, a lot of them are placed near the Taiwan border. And they're truly aimed towards the US and Taiwan during the conflict. So this would be a concern for the US, because the US would truly not know whether it's a conventionally armed missile or new nuclear armed missile. And China has, in some way, has done this deliberately to raise ambiguity. So I would say that I do not know the level of concern it is towards India, because we have, as Suyash mentioned, there's only one brigade near a small unit that's placed near the Indian border, while a larger number of units have been placed near the Taiwan border. So it's a concern for the United States for now, because China has not elaborated on the basing mode of the DF-26. So I would say that until and unless China disaggregates or elaborates more on the conventional and nuclear capabilities and becomes more transparent, we will not know the extent to which it fuels perception. For all we know, the US could be extensively mapping the mobility of these two missiles and could have a fairly good idea of of how they're operated how they're operated based on observations of where the nuclear warheads are kept and how the rocket maintenance is done, because China does most of its rocket maintenance at nighttime, and US has reconnaissance capabilities for night operations. So the US could very well know that so and so missile is conventional while the others are nuclear. So we cannot tell with certainty that the DF-26 is of a very big concern.
Yeah, I mean, if the Cold War is any guide, the US is definitely looking at those DF-26s very intently, even if it can't always tell what warhead is on at what time. And of course, as Suyash pointed out, in the fog of war, it may be impossible to tell. Now, I just want to move back to those silos. And the question I want to ask you both, though, is what should India do? Should India just ignore this? Does it change India's calculations? I'm asking partly because Pranav, you brought up the issue of creating a sponge and how China's not really in that sort of position. But yeah, it might hold true for the United States. But what about India? India, we are told, doesn't do counterforce, but those do present a large target set by themselves, don't they?
Yeah, we know China's posture. We know India's nuclear posture is one of absorbing a first strike and delivering a massive retaliation. We don't know the definition of massive retaliation, whether it's aimed at the civilian infrastructure, whether it's a counterforce or a counter value target. Some scholars, we know, Vipin Arang and Christopher Clary, assert that India has a counterforce capability against Pakistan. But whether this is true for China, we don't know. But the biggest concern for India is really this dilemma about being stuck in this nuclear area, where India has to satisfy its deterrence conditions for Pakistan, and for all we know, India may very well satisfy its deterrence conditions for Pakistan because they roughly have equal number of warheads. But India's biggest concern is how do they deter China, particularly at a time when they have a massive number of conventional capabilities, not just missiles, but also the bombers and submarines. But at the same time, if China is pressured to grow its nuclear arsenal, how can India really deter China, right? That's really the question. So for India, the concern is not just the silos in general, but the bigger picture of what these silos generally imply in the nuclear realm, particularly at a time when we know that we assume that because both sides have a no first use posture, the relations are stable. But stability of these relations could gradually deteriorate because of small actions, such as even the most recent, that is today, where China has gone back to the West China, where China has posted soldiers back to the Galwan Valley, and we might see a reverting to the 2020 condition again. So these small skirmishes could easily deteriorate India-China nuclear relations, where India might genuinely perceive that China is letting go of its no first use posture, or going easy with its no first use posture, taking liberties to launch on warning or launch under attack. So for India, the most concern is to view that this nuclear relationship does not deteriorate and it does not affect its own deterrence relationship with Pakistan or China.
I agree with what Pranay is saying. I agree with what Pranav is saying because yes, we are in such a geographical environment where we are completely surrounded by 2-3 nuclear powers. Also, I partially agree that silos, particularly silos, cannot be a factor or a trigger for radical changes in India's nuclear doctrine, posture, or capabilities. But on a broader set, my co-author Karthik and I, in a paper that we wrote, have argued that in a broader sense, there is some reconsiderations that have to be taken place in India's thinking about doctrine, capabilities, etc., especially capabilities, but also doctrine, where an element of more ambiguity should be added, perhaps following what China is doing as well. That is one possibility. Capabilities, definitely India is working on improving capabilities, and that is something that should continue in the future. That is a given. But largely, apart from this point, I largely agree with what Pranav is saying, that more concern for India is balancing how its nuclear dyad with Pakistan, and its then and how to calculate its nuclear dyad with China in the same equation. That is something that we need to study in the future.
All right. And Pranav, so what can the US do? We've talked about India.
The US right now, their response would, if they really want to be constructive in maintaining a stable nuclear relationship with China, would be to engage in China and discuss about what the intentions are and exchange intentions, strategic visions, and a more clarity on doctrines. The US certainly maintains a lot of ambiguity about its doctrine. Even though they make large publications, there is still a lot of room for interpretation, right? So behind closed doors, both sides, the most constructive thing they can do right now is have a strategic dialogue, if not an arms control agreement, right? Because the initial step is always a strategic dialogue. That's what is required at the moment, because China must clarify for the US what drives its silo building and what drives its military capabilities. Because even though there is, on the US side, even though many scholars in the United States say that it's US missile defense and counterforce capabilities that's driving China to build this large arsenal, there is a sense of doubt to me, because it's not that the US has suddenly acquired a new capability, right? For the past 15 years, US has maintained essentially the same capabilities. So the question is, why is China doing it now? Right? One answer might be that China has more resources to do it, or second, China's intentions might have truly changed. So there must be a clarification on what China's real intention is. And the US must respond as to what's the concern with missile defenses? What's the concern? What would be the consequences of having a new strategic missile, or the improved ICBM, which is the US is upgrading its Trident, which is the Trident DF5. So they must clarify what the intention of the new missiles are. And until and unless they do that, we would see a gradual buildup of misperception over the years. So initial step would be a dialogue. We don't know if that's yet to come, but hopefully it would.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. A dialogue would certainly be useful, at least in the US-China context. I will add that China seems completely uninterested in having a similar dialogue with little India. So I'm not sure how far any of this will actually end up helping. Certainly, looking at it from a broader perspective, all of this does seem, frankly, quite predictable. It's something that we've talked about for many years. Basically, US nuclear modernization and its BMD program would induce a response from the Chinese, which in turn would probably spur some responses from India, which would in turn spur responses from Pakistan. And so we should not be surprised. While anything can happen, we should not be surprised if in the next decade or two we see something not quite like an arms race, but perhaps more akin to a sort of arms crawl in this part of Asia. And that's just probably part of the price of doing business, and we can just hope that we don't have a terrible crisis or conflict in which these new developments cause things to go horribly wrong. But thank you so much, Suyash and Pranav. This is a really interesting topic, and I'm sure there'll be more to discuss in the coming months, and we'd love to have both of you back again.
Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you, Aditya.
And thank you all for joining us on All Things Policy.
The Takshashila Institution is an independent, non-partisan think tank and a school of public policy. We have education programs lasting 1 semester and 1 year that are tailored specifically for people like you. They are all online and you can take them from anywhere. Admissions are now open for our 12-week graduate certificate program in public policy, defense and foreign affairs, technology policy, and health and life sciences. Visit takshashila.org.in/courses to find out more.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. Let me tell you a little bit about what happened on the IVM Podcast Network this week. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus was joined by Irfan Pabani, who is an old friend of his. They talk about the rich flavors of Indian food and Parsi food specifically. He was also joined by author and historian William Dalrymple. They discuss literature, history, and the culture of the Indian subcontinent. And let me give you a few quick things to check out. Chuck, aka Deepak Gopal Krishnan of Simplified and the Origin of Things fame, has Rohan Joshi, formerly of AIB, on his show. Also on this round is on me. Gautam Purohit of Thakur's Bhojnalaya was on. On the note, Maruk Inayat talks about the cabinet reshuffle. And do check out Global Victoria Tech Talks. We talk about the booming gaming and edutech industries in Australia. Do follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram to keep up what's going on the network. And I'd like to finally thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cred, CET, and Global Victoria. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Feeling overwhelmed, anxious, struggling with too many obstacles, don't know where your life is headed? Well, if you are dealing with one or all of these, tune into the Positively Unlimited podcast, because in each episode, I share a life lesson, a life hack, a pro tip that can help you get your life back on track. All episodes are available on the IBM website, IBM Podcast app, or wherever it is that you get your podcast from.